What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I am your host, EJ Holland. I'll be answering all of your questions tonight. But before we do, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. And liking this video obviously helps us get in front of more Michigan fans. So make sure to hit that like button. As always, subscribe to thewolverine.com today. If you're not a subscriber to thewolverine.com yet, you can subscribe today using that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at thewolverine.com. Get everything Michigan recruiting, the team, basketball, transfer portal, and so much more. Plus, you can be part of a message board community with thousands and thousands of users. So make sure to head over to thewolverine.com, sign up today, use that promo code UM1. All right, guys. So remember, the questions will be answered in the order in which they were received. If you want to skip the line, you can hit that super chat button. That's the box with the dollar symbol. That'll allow you, again, to skip the line. It also contributes to my travel budget so I can continue to see top Michigan commits and targets across the country. All right, let's start off with Zachary Pizzo. He says, any new intel on remaining targets like Nick Abrams or Salisi Moa? Abrams is set to make his decision tomorrow, but I don't expect it to be Michigan. Not really optimistic about Moa right now. Seems like Utah is still trending as the team to beat there. I think when you look at guys Michigan has, decent chances with, obviously Savion Hyder comes to mind. That one's still a Michigan-Tennessee battle. Hyder's not a guy that really loves the recruiting process. He said he's going to announce a commitment date soon, and I'd expect Hyder to make a decision at some point before his senior year, which starts in August. And I still think Michigan is right up there, probably top two for Anthony Davis as well, four-star linebacker out of Georgia. I think they're top two for DQ Forkpa, who's a four-star linebacker out of IMG Academy, who is set to make his decision this week, but will be pushing things back. They're still battling hard for Devon Benjamin, the number one corner in the country. I would give Oregon the edge there, but Michigan is definitely making things interesting for him. So those are some of the, remaining targets that come to mind. Zachary Pizzo says, who are your early favorite 2027 targets we should be or start keeping an eye on? Unlike this cycle, I think 2027 is going to be one where Michigan works in and expands out. What I mean by that is there is a plethora of local talent. So Michigan will be more focused on in-state recruiting and regional recruiting, as opposed to going national and then spot recruiting its own backyard. This cycle, there are no commits from the state of Michigan. There's only two from the state of Illinois, and one's a kicker. There's no commits from this, there is one commit from the state of Ohio, and that's Jonathan Brown, who's an under-the-radar running back. So, the Midwest, or in surrounding states, it hasn't been very, it hasn't produced many Michigan commits this cycle, and it hasn't been the biggest of priority just because talent's down. You look at, the in-state prospects, and it's not a great year in the state of Michigan. It's not really a great year in the state of Illinois either. So I think that, and then Ohio winning those big battles is always tough in enemy territory. So this cycle, Michigan really hit Virginia hard, Maryland. They were up and down here on the East Coast. They hit Texas very hard. I think that, they kind of worked their way. They spot recruited regionally and recruited regularly on a national basis. In 2027, you have to start in your own backyard and work your way out. And saying that, I think some of the guys to keep an eye on are really close to home. Ricardo Kitchen at Muskegon, Dakota Warrant at Harper Woods. I think those are the top two guys in the state of Michigan for next cycle. Kitchen being an elite level pass rusher, Grant being one of the top wide receivers in the country already. I really like Anthony Cartwright, an on 300 tight end at Country Day. Detroit King has quite a bit of guys. Jameer Henry, who's an on 300 offensive lineman. Really like Daryl Flemister, who's kind of a more under the radar athlete there with an early Michigan offer. So there's a lot of talent in Michigan's own backyard. As far as national prospects that you have to keep an eye on, obviously Charles Woodson Jr. comes to mind, the son of Michigan legend Charles Woodson. He's down in Florida. Here in Virginia, you have Chris Whitehead, who's one of the top edge recruits in the country. The DMV always produces high-level edges. Michigan's had a lot of success there recently, whether it's Carter Meadows or Devin Baxter, Dominic Nichols, Tariq Boney. DMV equals, elite edge prospects, right? And you have a couple of them there with the James Pace at DeMatha, Anthony Sweeney at Good Counsel. Michigan's obviously prioritized the state of Texas this cycle. They have 3 commits from Texas. I think the best player in the country, in my opinion, is John Meredith, who's a 5-star corner at Euless Trinity in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I really like, Duvet Williams out in California. He visited Michigan here in the summer, and I think that the Wolverines are in the top group for him early on. Quarterbacks, Chip Lindsey's really casting a wide net. So Peter Bork's probably my favorite quarterback out in New England, but they're also in the mix with guys like Elijah Haven, who's down in Louisiana, and Teddy Gerard, who's down in Georgia. So those are definitely some names to know in 2027. Jackson16 says, how would you compare Donald Tabron to Keegan Croucher, Peter Bork, and Elijah Haven? Well, it's tough to compare quarterbacks that are young to the class above them. So Donald Tabron's a 2028, Croucher, Bork, and Haven, they're 2027s. And it's still so early when evaluating quarterbacks. Like, it's really early for quarterback evaluations in 2028. A lot of times you see mistakes made when evaluating quarterbacks that are this young. You'll have a guy like Jaden Davis who's ranked super high and then will drop just because he peaked early. So I think it's tough to really give opinions when guys are entering their sophomore seasons and comparing them to guys that are entering their junior seasons. I think Donald Tabron has the potential to be better than all of them. I think Tabron could very well be the next 5-star prospect out of Detroit. I think that he's that tall pocket passer at 6'3", 175. Will be interesting to see if he grows another inch or two. Terrific arm, really high-level processor already. He's a gamer. He won a state title as a freshman. And the thing I really like about Tabron is the intangibles. He's a great young leader. He's very charismatic. He's always consistently doing the little things to get better at his game. He does training out here, out east in North Carolina. He has a private quarterback trainer in Detroit, Donovan Dooley, who trained Bryce Underwood. He travels the country with Sound Mind, Sound Body 7-on-7 program. I think Donald Tabron checks a lot of boxes, and his personality, like I said, is great. He's one of my favorite young recruits already. Kind of reminds me of Dante Moore, even though that one didn't end well for Michigan. Obviously, I think the Wolverines are in a great spot for Tabron early on. He's already visited several times. And like I said, I think he can be rated higher than any of the 2027 targets. When you look at Croucher, Bork, and Haven, if you want to compare those guys, I think Bork is the most complete quarterback of those three. I think Haven has the biggest upside, and I think Croucher is probably a mix of a high floor and a high ceiling, and kind of reminds me of Brady Hart. Customer service says, can anyone name a better recruiting sports writer than EJ? Oh, wait, EJ makes Tuesdays rock. The Wolverine needs to sign you to a 20-year deal. Collectives need to give EJ some NIL. I mean, I wouldn't mind the NIL. A 20-year deal, man, I'd be in my 50s. I don't want to be covering recruiting as a 50-year-old. That would be kind of weird. EJ, CJ or Moa, who is the better athlete? Who's the best prospect you have ever evaluated, quarterback and non-quarterback? So the first question is CJ Sadler or Salisi Moa, who is a better athlete? That's a good question. I think they're different kinds of athletes. Salisi being a little bit more, definitely having the height advantage over CJ and being more of a long, fluid type of athlete. He's listed at 6'2", 175, whereas Sadler's like 5'9". Sadler's more of that compact, really explosive, super quick in short space type of athlete. So I just think they're different. And I think they're both, very high level athletes. In terms of who's the best prospect I've ever evaluated, Kyler Murray. That's the GOAT, man. Kyler Murray did some things that I've never seen any other high school football player do. He went undefeated in the highest classification in the state of Texas. Despite being a short quarterback, he, just checked all the boxes. He was absolutely amazing as a runner. He could make every single throw. He won every game in his high school career. Kyler was the best to ever do it, in my opinion. I don't know if I'll ever see another high school player like Kyler. Kyler was like must-see football in the Dallas area. Obviously, Texas is crazy about high school football, but you'd have people from every part of the Metroplex, different parts of the state, just come up to see Kyler. He was like a phenomenon. It was crazy. I did not enjoy my interviews with Kyler, but he is definitely the best I've ever covered. He was not the most pleasant guy, but he was extremely talented. In terms of the best non-quarterback I've ever covered, well, Kyler was obviously the quarterback. The best non-quarterback I've ever covered, I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I would have to think about that. Ryan says, you touched on it a bit last week, but can you go over how NIL works for top guys? So the $1 million plus offers for guys like Meadows, Gerald, and Russell, do they get that now or when they get to campus? Okay, yeah. So the best way to explain this is there's two separate types of NIL for high school recruits. One is rev share, and that's where you'll have the majority of recruits get their money. And that's when they arrive on campus, they'll be given a certain percentage of the overall rev share cap. So say the cap is like 18 grand or something like that. They'll get a certain, not 18 grand, that's super low. But anyway, they'll get a certain percentage of that. So 18 million, right? I don't know. I have a headache today. But 18 million, say the cap's 18 million, right? Like they'll get a certain percentage of that. So you can divide it however much you want. So you could pay Bryce Underwood $1 million, but that would leave you 17 million to work with the rest of your roster. Or you could pay Bryce $3 million, and that would leave you, whatever it is, 15 million with the rest of your roster. So it's up to Sean McGee to construct that and to figure out how much he's going to pay the guys that are already on the team, what the incoming freshmen will make as true freshmen, and what money he needs to reserve for the portal guys that would be coming in as well. So, the true freshmen are going to be paid. Most of the true freshmen are going to be paid off of the rev share, off of the $18 million or whatever the cap is. And then you have another separate situation. So for rev share, think of all the 3 stars, all the guys that are probably ranked outside of the top 150 or so. All of those guys will be paid off rev share, and probably even guys maybe creeping into that top 100 range as well. For the select few top 100 elite athletes, they will be paid separately through the collective, or through a private donor that goes through the collective. And those athletes will be paid up front. So they will get the money now as opposed to when they enroll at Michigan. The reason being is that you want to avoid the NCAA clearinghouse. So any deal that is of any significance money wise has to go through the new Deloitte clearinghouse. It does not have to go through the Deloitte clearinghouse if the recruit is not an NCAA athlete yet, which recruits are not, obviously. So if there was a guy named Kavion Miter and they wanted to give him $5 million, they would really front load that and pay it up front, whether that's in installments or right away, or you get it when you sign but not enroll. So there's some type of binding agreement. I'm sure in these contracts, like you saw Jackson Cantwell or Felix Ojo sign these deals, I'm sure there's some type of language in there that if you don't enroll or you transfer after a year or something, you have to give some of that money back. And, in that situation, you would have to go to court and all that stuff. But since it's so complicated, that is really only reserved for the top of the board, 5-star, top 50, maybe top 100 type of recruits. So, and NIL has to be legal in the state. So, for example, NIL is legal in Virginia. So if there was a guy named Kavion Miter and I wanted to give him $5 million, I could. NIL is not legal in Hawaii. So Malachi Lee could only be paid once he enrolls off of rev share or risk his high school eligibility if he were to be paid through a collective or a separate entity. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Ryan says, name 2 guys you think are underrated in the new Rivals rankings. 2 that are accurate, 2 that are probably ranked too high as of right now until they improve during their seasons. Okay, so 2 guys that are underranked, 2 that are overranked, and 2 that are accurate. I'm just going to pull them up so I don't fumble this question. Yeah, so if you guys didn't see, On3 released its updated rankings in conjunction with Rivals. Those rankings are now being labeled as Rivals rankings, but they're actually On3's old rankings. So Rivals' ranking staff did not come over during the merger. The On3 rankings department has stayed intact. So the guy heading up the rankings is still Charles Power. So Carter Meadows, for example, he was ranked number 6 previously, and he's now ranked number 5. He was ranked something stupid for Rivals, like 240 or something. That ranking just went away. And like I said, the rankings department for Rivals did not join the On3 rankings department. So the Rivals ranking you are seeing for Carter Meadows, number 5, he was already number 6. But the number 5 ranking you're seeing is just the updated On3 ranking, which has now moved to be labeled as Rivals. And the best way I can explain what Rivals is to On3, because On3 owns Rivals, but this kind of makes it seem like Rivals now owns On3. On3 still cashes my check. So the best way to explain this is when you go to a website like I don't know, man, like ESPN, right? They have separate websites that you can go to. So at one point, like ESPN had I don't even know if this still exists, but the only reason I know about it is because I had a friend that wrote there. But ESPN had I obviously do not frequent sports websites enough to have this knowledge, but if you go to ESPN, or if you went to ESPN, they had a page called The Undefeated, which was its own website by itself, but it was under the ESPN umbrella. And so it's the same thing with On3. On3 owns Rivals. Rivals is now under the On3 umbrella, and everything national high school recruiting and rankings will be labeled as Rivals. So we are basically looking at the updated On3 rankings, which are now the Rivals rankings. And so to answer the question, two recruits that Rivals / On3 is underrating, I would go with Markel Dabney, who's a 3-star linebacker out of Virginia. He's actually a 3-star across the board, so it's not just Rivals. I just think he's underrated in general. I think that he's a guy who could easily outplay his ranking and be a multi-year starter at linebacker. I think that they probably are undervaluing Zion Robinson. I get that Zion is a boomer bust prospect. I wouldn't have him as high as 24/7, which has him in the top 100, but I also wouldn't grade him as a 3-star prospect either. I think he's a clear 4-star prospect. So, On3 / Rivals is definitely undervaluing Zion. Two that are overrated. Two recruits that are overrated. Okay. I will say Mikhail Blade, and this isn't a knock on Mikhail as much as that it's tough to rank Mikhail Blade a top 200 prospect, in my opinion, because he hasn't played any football. He hasn't been able, and thus hasn't been able to do any off-season events. He's coming back from a torn ACL. That's not to say that Mikhail can't rebound from that injury and go on to have a very productive career. Obviously, a lot of people recover from torn ACLs and are fine. Some people don't. But I think I'd like to see how Mikhail plays as a senior before giving him a top 200 ranking, because there is no film from him from last year. There's no offseason data. There's nothing to really go off of. And again, that's not a knock on Mikhail as a prospect. I think he's a really intriguing prospect. I think he can be a guy who's a stand-up or slide inside, but there's just no data, no film. Another guy that On3 is accurate, or another guy that's overrated, I guess. Another guy that's overrated. I don't know, man. I don't think that there's anybody else that On3 / Rivals is really overrating. If you wanted to make an argument that Carter Meadows shouldn't be a top 5 player in the country, but should be more of a borderline 5-star, you could, because most of his grade is based off of potential, and we haven't really seen that production. We've only seen flashes of it, but I'm not going to sit here and say Carter Meadows is overrated. He's one of my favorite guys. But I could see where you could make that argument. In terms of two guys who are rated appropriately, Brady Smeagol for sure. He's ranked 292. I have him as a borderline top 300, low 4-star type of guy. I think the Rivals On3 ranking is correct. I think the long-term projection for Brady Smeagol is back up to Bryce Underwood and potentially a late career starter, but could be recruited over by whoever they take in 27. And if they land Taverin in 28, he's obviously the future. Dorian Barney. I think a lot of people have been arguing for Dorian Barney. I want to see more from Dorian Barney. I don't mind the high 3-star ranking. Really don't. All right. Ben Rickett says, if Michigan doesn't land Nick Abrams tomorrow, do you think they will stay on him or move in a different direction? If they move in a different direction, what are your thoughts on Forkba or Davis? I'm sure they'll keep in contact, but I think that one would require more NIL. I think that Michigan is in the top 2 for both Forkba and Davis. I think that Davis is really intriguing. I really like him as a will prospect. Think he's a really good scheme fit. I think Forkba is more raw and a little bit more of a boomer bust, but his testing numbers were extremely impressive. I think Forkba will take his recruitment into the fall. I think Davis will obviously know his decision on August 2nd. Ben Ricketts says, with the class having 21 commits already, what would be your best guess of how Michigan rounds out the class? I'm probably looking at like 5 more. So it would be a running back, which would preferably be Savion Hyder, another offensive lineman. They might just take a flyer on a projection guy if, they decide not to spend big with NIL, which right now doesn't appear like they are. They would like to add another linebacker, maybe 2, but probably 1. They'd love to land an elite corner like Devon Benjamin. If that doesn't work out, I'd love to see them try to flip Kari Adams. And they obviously want a true taller, longer safety. They missed on Chase Calicut and Jordan Deck, but I think things are still in play with Jordan Deck. I think Michigan has done a great job here in recent weeks, so I wouldn't rule out a Jordan Deck flip to fill the safety spot. So puts him around 26. Tyson Smith says, anything new on Hyder? Like I said earlier, I'd expect Hyder to make his decision before his senior season, but maybe not until closer to that time. He's still kind of feeling things out, talking things over with his family, continuing to have discussions with Tennessee and Michigan. He obviously announced that he was going to put out a commitment date soon. That hasn't come out. It's July 15th. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it comes closer to the start of his senior season, but definitely before, just because Hyder is not a kid who loves the recruiting process. So nothing like really groundbreaking to report with Savion. I think discussions with Michigan have been going well, and I still really like where Michigan stands. Tyson Smith says, why do you hate Brady Smigel? Obviously, I don't hate Brady Smigel. I think in a class, after you just landed a 5-star in Bryce Underwood, you want to get a safe option. You don't want to have another quarterback room like we saw last season, which was a direct result of taking projects at the position. You didn't have a real quarterback, right? Like Alex Orji coming out of high school, he was a developmental guy who I actually wrote that I thought he would end up being a linebacker. Jaden Denegal, I did not like at all. I graded him as like a low 3-star, and he was obviously a project. Jaden Davis, despite all the angry tweets, was a project, for at least in my opinion. So I think you want a safe, high floor guy, and that's what Brady Smigel is, and that's fine, man. Like, not every quarterback has to be some top 100, top 200 level quarterback. Like, sometimes you just need a guy who can be a serviceable option, be a safe, high floor quarterback who brings a high football IQ to the quarterback room. And Brady Smigel is that. He's older for his grade. He's a guy who is the son of a coach. He's already mature. I think he'll fit in well as that backup to Bryce, and maybe we'll have a chance to play late in his career, which again is completely fine. Not every quarterback's going to be the greatest thing ever. Not every quarterback's going to be Bryce. So I think that Brady is a good filler quarterback or a good gap year quarterback between Bryce and a really, really good quarterback in 27, like a Peter Bork. And then you move on to 2028, where you have another face of the franchise in your own backyard in Donald Tabor. So I don't hate Brady Smigel. I just think he's, he is what he is. I'm projecting him to be a backup late career starter. Does that warrant a top 200 ranking? No. And when you look at his, athletic profile, I would grade him a low 4-star anyway, because he is limited in terms of his arm strength. He doesn't have an elite arm. Like I said, he's already older for his grade. He's older than Bryce. So you don't really have a lot of room for growth. There isn't a lot of potential there. I don't see too much of a high ceiling. I will say he's a better athlete in and around the pocket than Jaden Davis. He's a taller pocket passer. So, that already gives him an advantage over a shorter Jaden Davis. I think he's a better version of Jaden Davis, a much safer option. He's mechanically sound, whereas Jaden Davis has that weird, I don't even know what to call it, like he's tossing a potato. But Brady Smeagol is very mechanically sound. He can be accurate, short to intermediate. If you put him in a game, he can win a game for you at a high level. And like I said, he's the son of a coach. He has a high football IQ. He's very cerebral. I think he'll add to that quarterback room. I don't hate Brady Smeagol. I actually like the Brady Smeagol take as a gap year, so you can have a safe bet before you go into your 2027 quarterback evaluations. Tyson Smith says, are you excited about Manny Pacquiao coming back to boxing? I guess, he fights this weekend against Mario Barrios for a title. But yeah, man, I think Manny Pacquiao is too old, man. It's probably somebody should probably advise him not to get in the ring this weekend. Customer service says, did DQ delay his decision because of Michigan? Customer service, you asked 3 questions in your one chat box last time, man. So, you're only limited to 4 questions. So your 4th question is, remember, you are limited to 4 questions unless you super chat. So the 4th question for a customer service is, did DQ Forkpa delay because of Michigan? I think the strong run made by Michigan definitely helped in delaying his decision. It appears that Florida State also made a big run. They're not being talked about as much as Michigan, and I think Michigan's ahead of Florida State right now, but that played a role as well. Let's see. Jack Chan says, well, I'm not sure what Jack Chan says. You can retype that, Jack Chan. John A. Schultz says, EJ, if your cat was a Pokemon, what kind of Pokemon would he or she be? What powers would he or she have? Well, I call her Litten already, so she would be a Litten, which is not a old school Pokemon. It's actually a new school Pokemon, and it's a fire cat, so definitely Litten. Brett Allen says, CJ Sadler not being a top recruit to me blows my mind. Why is he not an option if you know? I can't really get into why he's not an option. Like I said, just moving parts. It's just not something that's going to work out with Michigan. I think CJ is a very talented player, but there's some things that would probably need to get sorted before he becomes an option. And at this point in the cycle, I just don't think he will become one. Eric George says, is Ben Boulware still an option? Michigan weighing if Gerald goes elsewhere. He is still an option, but I think it would be a very difficult path to see him in the class at this point. Michigan already has a pretty big defensive line group. John A. Schultz says, EJ, any flips eminent in the secondary, perhaps a safety committed to a school in Texas? I mentioned earlier, Michigan is still in a really good spot with Jordan Deck, who is committed to Baylor. John A. Schultz says, EJ, who are your favorite re-ranks from the Michigan class in the new Rivals 300, your least favorite? There wasn't a lot of movement when it came to Michigan commits. Like, there was one recruit that received a big bump, and that was Alistair Vallejo. There was one recruit that suffered a big drop, and that was Brady Smeagol. And I like both of them. I think that Smeagol, again, is more of a back-end guy. And I think Alistair Vallejo rightfully got his bump. So I really like that. Outside of the commits, I really like that Savion Hyder got his 5th star. I mean, he's the clear number 1 running back in the country. John A. Schultz says, EJ, list your top 3 all-time A24 movies. Ghost Story, Lamb, Midsommar. The Witch, honorable mention. Kure Luo, is BJM being unfairly criticized? No. Yes and no, I guess. No, he deserves criticism for sure. He could definitely do a better job. you could make the argument that Michigan doesn't have a high price tag on linebackers, and therefore BJ gets a little bit of a pass because they're not spending or not overspending for. Not that Nick Abrams isn't a great recruit, obviously he is, but they're not spending as much as maybe other schools would for Nick Abrams because it doesn't seem like Michigan values the linebacker position as much as maybe some other schools. So yeah, you could say that, and that is true. But at the same time, I think that Brian G. Mary could do a lot better as a pure recruiter. Burke says EJ's chances on Hyder. I think we land him 65% chance we do. Why don't we keep your percentage? I'll take it. Michelle Wallace says, I believe Savion Hyder is ours to lose. What do you think about Devon Benjamin? Jordan Deck, can we flip him from Baylor? Devon Benjamin, Michigan's right there, but I would still give Oregon the edge. And yes, I think that Michigan can flip Jordan Deck for Baylor. I did my hot board yesterday and included Deck on the board for a reason. Michelle Wallace says EJ is the GOAT. Burke says, EJ, do you think our wide receiver room is good? Do you think we should get another wide receiver recruit after missing out on Russell? The wide receiver room right now definitely needs some help. Obviously, last cycle, you landed two really intriguing guys that brought size in Jamar Browder and Jacob Washington. They were the first, legitimate 6'3" guys since Amarion Walker and Darius Clemens, who are no longer on the roster. So I think both of those guys have a lot of upside. Obviously, Andrew Marsh is a guy who I think can play early. He has his limitations, but there's a lot to like about his game. And then, coming into this class, you have Zion Robinson, who could just explode and be all world if he, puts it all together as an actual receiver because the metrics are so good. And then you have Travis Johnson, who can come in and play as a freshman. So I think the wide receiver room now has good size with Browder, with Washington, even with Marsh, who's 6'1", but he plays bigger than 6'1". He's a guy who's really aggressive at the catch point and is just so physical. And then you have Travis Johnson, who's 6'3". You have Zion Robinson, who's right around there as well, 6'2.5", I think. So yeah, you have the size. Now you need the speed. Michigan, not well known for landing guys that run a sub 1100 meter. Zion will instantly become the fastest guy in the wide receiver room. So it would be nice for Michigan to keep adding speed. I think that's the missing element. Brooke says, EJ, do you think our wide receiver class is good this year? Oh, it's the same question. I didn't answer, should Michigan add another? They probably won't add another receiver unless, it's a big time like NIL type of guy late in the cycle. Jason Eystone says, I lived in DFW for 20 plus years. Can confirm dude was a prodigy. I think he's talking about my Kyler Murray story. John A. Schultz says, yes or no, Texas or Bama will successfully flip Malachi Lee. Right now I say no. Michelle Wallace says, you're so excited when you're talking about the high school football, but you always say you don't care about football. You're very good at your job. No. I don't care about football in general, but I do care about high school football. I love high school football. I'm probably one of the biggest high school football fans out there. I could tell you about any leagues in any state. I was just having an argument today talking about how Jalen Pyle's league in Texas, TAPS, is worse than the ISL, the main league in New England, where Marky Walbridge plays in. Even though New England gets crapped on for high school football, their high school football has improved dramatically, and the ISL is really good relatively for that region. And then TAPS is not very good in the state of Texas. It's lower level competition. So someone was trying to make an argument that Jalen Pyle plays this great competition just because he's a Texas kid, and that's just not true. Whereas if somebody made the argument that Marky Walbridge plays poor competition because he's in New England, that's not true either. The ISL has some exciting matchups. I am personally excited to go see Marky Walbridge play against Peter Pork. If you ask me, hey, EJ, would you want tickets to go see a divisional round play or the NFC Championship, and it's the Lions and the Packers, or if you do you want tickets to go see Alabama at Auburn, or would you rather see IMG versus St. Francis? I'm taking IMG versus St. Francis 10 out of 10. Customer service says, I've been at job for a long time doing customer service, but I have saved diligently. Now I am ready for something new. Should I try starting a F? And by F, he means a franchise. And you should start a franchise. Are you a displaced corporate executive or just wanting to put your career in your own hands? Or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Well, Andy Luedecke can help. Andy is a huge college sports fan and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough consultation and evaluation process. Call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Best of all, his services are 100% free to you. So what do you have to lose? You can contact Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. You can hit him up at 404-973-9901. Or you can visit him at www.myperfectfranchise.net. And Andy can help you with any type of franchise. We always talk about the Culvers and the Chick-fil-A's and the McDonald's, but what about owning a Walgreens? I have a migraine right now. I'm going to Walgreens after this show to get some Excedrin. You could own a Walgreens. And, Walgreens has all types of stuff. You could get beef jerky. You could get some chocolates. You could get shampoo. I mean, who doesn't want an all-in-one store? You can own a Walgreens if you hit up Andy today at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. All right. Jorge says, EJ, I hope you stay on the Michigan beat long term. Love how you cover recruiting for Michigan. Who's your favorite recruit in the 26 class? My favorite recruit in the 2026 class. Probably Travis. I've kind of struggled there. I had to make sure I wasn't missing anybody. But probably Travis, just because I know Travis, I've known Travis the longest. He lives 20 minutes away from me. I see him all the time. He doesn't have like this super magnetic personality. He's kind of quiet, but he's really funny. And he's just a chill guy. Like anybody would enjoy hanging out with Travis. Like he's just a cool dude. So Travis Johnson, I really like Markel Dabney. He's super energetic. If you haven't watched the Q&A video with Markel Dabney that we have here on the Wolverine YouTube channel, go watch it. He's just like super animated all the time. I can only take that in short bursts though. I like the low energy. So that, I'd give the nod to Travis. No offense to my guy, Markel. I like all the guys that I cover in my region. Andre's great. Carter's great. Boney's great. So yeah. John A. Schultz says, EJ, Barney is not appropriately rated. He should be a 5-star. The shed equals 5-star status. Well, if you threw his commitment ceremony into the mix from an evaluation perspective, then yeah, you could give Barney a 5-star answer. Look, people can't get enough of Andy. We had that banner pop up. People really want to get a franchise here. If you want to be like Dorian Barney and get a shed, you can do that too. I'm sure that Andy can help you own a Lowe's or a Home Depot or something. But anyway, Jason Eystone says, any idea if Michigan is considering an in-stadium advertising? I hope not, but I've heard rumblings or discussions. I'm not sure. With everything that's happening with NIL, like, it'd be crazy if, it'd be crazy not to do that one. But it'll be crazy in a few years when you're going to see like uniforms with like a Best Buy patch on them. And, and that's why you should get into My Perfect Franchise right now, because uniforms can have all types of stuff. Like you see the soccer jerseys and they say like State Farm, like that could be college football uniforms in a little while. And you could start right away with Andy's and be like, look, Michigan's sponsored by Culver's and you could own a Culver's. But anyway, I don't really know. I would assume that there would be some type of in-stadium advertising across the country. And eventually that continues to develop as schools want to spend more and more on NIL. Charles Lee says favorite commit in the class so far. So like I said, my favorite guy to cover is Travis. My favorite commit, the best commit is Carter Meadows by a good margin. Charles Lee says, where does the name On3 come from? I believe I think Shannon Terry told us this when he first bought the Michigan site, and I don't remember, which is a failure on my part. But I believe that it is like team on three, like, 1, 2, 3, go team. I think it has something to do with that. Corey G says, I see you're big into boxing. Do you actively box? I used to box out of the great Marvin Hagler gym. Wow, that's awesome, man. I would love to. I live in Norfolk. I'd love to visit the Purnell, Whitaker, wherever he trained, but that would be great. No, I don't actively box. I do have a punching bag in here. So I do work boxing when I work out, but I've never actually boxed. But yeah, big fan. Maddie S says, if Michigan misses out on Hyder, who else is out there that they may look at? Who knows? I really don't know, man. Like they could circle back to Javian Osborne. They could circle back to Ryan Estrada. They could, look at somebody that pops up late, but it's really Hyder or bust at this point. And John A. Schultz says, take those Lions versus Packers NFC Championship tickets and sell them instead of going to a high school football game. Well, the good thing is I get to go to high school football games for free. And if you want all my coverage on all the high school football games from the fall and on everything Michigan recruiting, you can head over to thewolverine.com. Make sure to use that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months over at thewolverine.com. Get everything exclusive Michigan insider recruiting, the team, basketball transfer portal, and more. Plus, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll be back with another show next week.